Oh boy, get ready for 1,000 years of exaggerations and embellishments about ancient history. Imagine the same story passed down through generations, getting more ludicrous every time. Well, what do you get in the end? You get a story of assassins, a mysterious order that spawned dozens of games and hundreds of myths. But were these ancient hitmen really that elusive? How much truth is there in the game series, and what connects assassins with Templars? We'll spill the beans in the next couple of minutes as we transform ourselves into the skin of a mysterious warrior from the past. Introducing Mohammed Salah and his new digs, Alamat Fortress. It's the year 11 OAD, and our Mohammed resides about 100 kilometers northwest of modern-day Iran's capital. That's where the infamous Order of Assassins, birthplace of so many legends, was based. Its origins lie in the fundamental conflicts among followers of Islam. To put it simply, the Sunnis recognized only the Prophet Muhammad and elected their rulers, while the Shiites preferred not only Muhammad but also his cousin Ali, and in turn, their ruler had to belong to Ali's lineage and be a descendant of legendary ancestors. This is crucial because later, the movement split into several factions, and their hatred for each other was often higher than their enmity towards Christians. Spoiler alert, assassins, being a branch of the Shiites, even joined forces with Christian crusaders to fight against Sunnis. The first myth we encounter is that assassins are a sect. Nah, my friends, better known as Nizari Ismailis, the assassins were an entire state that lasted from 1090 to 1256 and occupied a vast territory from Tajikistan to North Africa. Our Mohammed Salah is a subject of ruler Hassan ibn Sabah, who will go down in history as the founder of the assassin movement. Hassan was a smart lad, enamored with the teachings of Ismailis, a Shiite branch of Islam. He became a wandering preacher, catching the attention of a high-ranking Persian official, Nizam al-Mulk. Legends say they were friends, but that's been debunked long ago. All we need to know is that Nizam ordered Hassan's arrest, but the crafty lad escaped and, converting Alamat Fortress to his faith, took it over without firing a single shot. And thus, the state of assassins was born. Times were tough because in the fortress, besides our Mohammed Salah, there were no more than 1,000 people, peanuts compared to the mighty empires of the time. This is why they widely employed contract killers. Hassan's logic was simple. In those days, every war went like this. Two nobles would quarrel, stand on opposing hills, and watch their armies butcher each other. Hassan, sitting in Alamat Fortress, figured that if he killed the noble, his army wouldn't fight. And this tactic worked brilliantly. The only question was the people. Where to find such elegant killers? Enter our Mohammed Salah, folks. But the word assassin is often misinterpreted. It was coined by their bitter enemies, the Sunnis, and many associate its origin with hashish. Supposedly, ruler Hassan would get people high on hashish. They'd fall asleep, and upon waking up, find themselves in a room with all sorts of pleasures, resembling paradise. Our future assassin would feast, get high again, and when he woke up, Hassan would say it's just a demo version of paradise, and to enter the real deal, the assassin had to obey all orders. Don't envy our Salah too soon. All of this is propaganda nonsense. The Sunnis were keen to portray the Shiites as crazy drug addicts, and excavations in Alamat deny the very existence of that simulated paradise room. The word assassin was meant as an insult, but for different reasons since it derived from hashishia, and its closest translation would be dope heads. After all, our Mohammed Salah is more like a Spartan. Hassan ibn Sabah recruited future assassins from impoverished families, seeking to convert still developing minds to his faith. Salah's life awaited him as a peasant who, throughout his existence, would see nothing but fields and kicks from nobles, and Hassan promised him education and paradise after death. It's easy to understand that the vast majority of poor folks would become assassins without any paradise demos. There's a legend that candidates would stand by Alamat's doors, sitting for days without food or water, enduring insults and kicks from the locals. Those who didn't break were accepted for training, while the rest were free to go. But that legend was debunked long ago, as such harsh selection was unnecessary, given that poor people flocked in droves for the promise of paradise, including our Mohammed Salah. This led to assassins effortlessly taking one fortress after another. In the end, a whole state was formed. Their reputation as deadly killers spread far and wide, and ruler Hassan of Alamat was dubbed the Mountain Sage. In essence, he had the first elite special forces in history. Our Salah spent years studying Eastern martial arts, mastering any weapon, and his theatrical skills helped him flawlessly transform into any target. And you know what? Just like any other assassin, Mohammed had his regional specialization. Salah's stomping ground was Persia, so he went through an intensive crash course in the language, customs, and local life to pass as a native. Remember that Persian fellow, Nizam al-Mulk, who tried to arrest the mountain sage Hassan. He hated the assassin teachings but had a soft spot for Sufi mystics. On October 14, 1092, after evening prayer, locals, including guys dressed as Sufis whom he admired, approached him. One of them was our Muhammad, who said hello with a dagger through his heart. This became one of the iconic assassinations in their history, solidifying their reputation as folks you better not mess with. Despite their vast numbers, the rulers of neighboring territories even slept in their armor, terrified enough to only allow trusted subjects into their presence. Moreover, assassins invented extortion and demanded tribute from certain officials in exchange for their protection. But here's another myth we debunk. Assassins, though masters of stealth, weren't exactly escape artists. During the rule of the mountain sage, about 70 people were killed by his orders, and more than 100 assassins sacrificed their lives for that. The thing is, in most cases, once the mission was accomplished, the assassin didn't flee anywhere. Why bother when the job was done? And ahead lay paradise with wine and avarice. Moreover, the assassins often publicly announced the ruler's will and delivered intimidating speeches, and quite often, they were executed afterward. That's what made them popular, elusive killers who feared nothing for their own lives and struck terror even into the hearts of Europeans. In truth, after the ruler's death and as the state's decline neared, the assassins started working on a contract basis, eliminating both Christian and Islamic targets. But what's their similarity to Sparta, as we mentioned earlier? Well, it lies in their commitment to maximum asceticism. The mountain sage preached the rejection of worldly pleasures, simplicity in life, and the absence of temptations. So, it outright debunks the theory that the assassins adored hashish. Sure, Hassan rarely killed just for amusement. Assassins avoided harming the innocent. Their goal was to prevent wars against them or their supporters. Their targets were carefully chosen, meticulously planned, and high-ranking officials of hostile countries were hit. The order had a strict hierarchy, accurately portrayed in the games. Our Salah, Rafik, that means behind him is a murder, and he managed to survive. In the first game, the head of the bureau in Damascus is called Rafik, and now you know that it's not a name but a position. Simple operatives were called Fid'in, and Salah's job was their training. Higher up the ladder were the Dai, who conveyed the ruler's will to Muhammad and his team. If Salah succeeds, one day he'll reach the status of Dai al-Kerbal. They are the elite of assassins, initiated into all secrets, who, alongside the mountain sage, choose targets and shape the state's policies. At this stage, the belief in paradise practically faded away, replaced by cold calculation as the time of the Crusades approached. Despite their simplicity and rejection of worldly goods, the assassins took education seriously. Al-Lamad boasted one of the most advanced libraries on the planet. Historians believe that from an engineering perspective, the fortress's defense was ahead of its time by about 200 years. Persians and Seljuks repeatedly attempted to storm Al-Lamad, but it remained impregnable thanks to its secret passages, defensive structures, and the sudden deaths of army commanders. Still, there weren't that many assassins, and the Sunnis pressed on, and on the horizon appeared a rather unexpected ally, the Crusaders. Remember Al-Mu'alim from the first game? He has a real-life prototype, Rashid ad-Din Sinan. The Christians indeed granted the assassins the fortress of Masyaf for their services in the fight against the Sunni ruler Saladin. However, after the mountain sage Hassan's death, the order lost its grip. At least 3 documented attempts to kill Saladin and end the war failed. And later, the Christian ruler Conrad of Montferrat betrayed the assassins, looting their lands out of the blue. Guess what happened next? You got it. Conrad woke up with a knife in his heart, but it didn't make things any easier for the killer state. Our Salah had to fight on 2 fronts, executing orders from both sides. Following Saladin's orders, the assassins killed European kings Raymond II and the Duke of Bavaria. In turn, following the Christians' orders, they dispatched 6 viziers and 3 caliphs. Balancing on 2 chairs was tough, but these guys managed. It was only the onslaught of the Golden Horde in 1256 that destroyed the assassin state. But that's no reason to be ashamed. The Horde was wiping out everyone back then. And in defense of the assassins, let's note that the last sage even attempted a couple of assassinations against the Khan of the Horde. Nevertheless, according to the unestimates, the teachings of the mountain sage Hassan are now followed by around 15 million people. Furthermore, Prince Karim Aga Khan IV, a citizen of Switzerland, is a direct descendant of the last mountain sage. Karim has met with the Queen of England and Vladimir Putin, so purely formally, the Order of Assassins is still around and kicking. Calling our Mohammed Salah's life good would be silly. He was an assassin, but let's not forget the traditional rule of the channel Another History. Times were tough, and back then, killing was commonplace. The different story is that thanks to their tactic of targeted eliminations, the assassins created an unprecedented state that lasted for several centuries. However, the phrase "nothing is true, everything is permitted" was not invented by them. It was coined by William Burroughs, a fan of the Assassins, and Kurt Cobain. And, in general, the romanticism of hired killers came from the ancient Marco Polo, who described a mountain of myths, ranging from the Paradise Chamber to stories that Hassan's followers committed mass suicides to prove their devotion to faith. Also, the Assassins had no connection to the Templars. There was no enmity between these folks. The game decided to link the two orders for the plot, but in reality, although they existed at the same time, they hardly crossed paths. It's not excluded that someone from the Templars met their end at the hand of an assassin, but it was no more than a routine contract. A large part of their image is artificially exaggerated and sometimes mixed up with other mercenaries, like the Indian thugs and stranglers, whose history is equally colorful. Well, that, just like the Templars, is a story for future videos. But for now, that's all from us. Until we meet again, friends.